For 6 years now, the United States has held Syria in a pretty tight economic grip. But now, in a huge policy reversal, it looks like those chains are about to be broken. Today, we're going to dig into a decision coming out of Washington, D.C. that could completely reshape Syria's future. Let's dive in.
And look, this isn't just some minor tweak to foreign policy. For nearly 6 years, a really powerful set of sanctions has basically defined America's relationship with Syria. But that policy, it's now being flipped on its head, signaling a potential new era for the country and, honestly, raising some massive questions about what comes next.
All right, so let's start with the big news itself. What exactly just went down in the halls of the US government to get this ball rolling?
Well, the first domino just fell. The U.S. House of Representatives gave a green light to a bill that would lift these major sanctions. But here's the really clever part, the legislative strategy. By tucking this provision into the massive must-pass defense policy bill, its supporters have seriously boosted the odds of it just sailing right through Congress and becoming law.
But to really get why this is such a huge deal, we've got to understand the policy that's being taken apart. So let's do a quick deep dive on the Caesar Act itself.
So the Caesar Act, it's not just a little slap on the wrist. No, it's a comprehensive set of sanctions designed to put maximum economic and political pressure on the regime of Bashar al-Assad, who, as you know, was forced from power but is still a key figure.
And we're not talking about some dusty, forgotten policy from way back when. The Caesar Act was passed in 2019. This represents a very firm, very modern U.S. stance against the Assad government's actions.
And its purpose was crystal clear: to hold the Assad regime accountable for just horrific, widespread human rights abuses during the country's brutal civil war. And that's the key point here. These sanctions were built on a foundation of moral outrage, which, makes the decision to lift them now all the more complex.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question, right? If these sanctions were all about punishing human rights abuses, why on earth would you lift them? Well, it turns out the push for change is actually coming from a new government in Syria itself.
The main person driving this is Syria's current president, Ahmed Shara. Since he took power, he's basically been on a diplomatic campaign to convince the US that the Caesar Act isn't a tool for justice anymore, but just a roadblock preventing the country from rebuilding and moving on.
And this quote, it perfectly sums up the official line you're hearing from Washington. This isn't being framed as letting Assad off the hook, not at all. It's being presented as a strategic pivot. The official story is, we're giving Syria a chance to chart a post-Assad future.
Okay, so a yes vote in the House is a massive step, but the process isn't over yet. Let's walk through what has to happen next for this to actually become law.
Now, this is a really critical detail. The bill is designed to be surgical, not a sledgehammer. It lifts the broad economic sanctions that have squeezed the entire Syrian economy. But, and this is a big but, it leaves in place the highly targeted sanctions on Bashar al-Assad himself and his inner circle. The idea is to punish the bad actors, not the entire population.
So here's the roadmap. Step 1, House approval, check, that's done. Now the bill goes to the Senate, and because it's part of that big defense bill we talked about, it's widely expected to pass. Once that happens, it gets signed into law, and poof, the broad sanctions are formally lifted.
Oh, and there's an important off switch built into this whole thing. The law gives the White House the flexibility to snap the sanctions right back into place if they need to. It's a way to keep some leverage and hold Syria's new government to its promises.
So we've talked a lot about the politics in Washington, but what does all of this actually mean on the streets of Damascus and Latakia? Let's zoom in on the impact this decision is already having right there, on the ground.
The reaction in Syria was immediate and just really emotional. The news from the US sparked scenes of pure joy. In the city of Latakia, crowds literally poured into the streets to celebrate. For them, this wasn't some abstract political move. It was a real, tangible sign of hope after years of being cut off.
And it's so easy to see why. For years, these sanctions have been a crushing weight on the Syrian economy, affecting everything from the price of food to the availability of medicine. So many people there see getting rid of them as the single most important key to unlocking their country's recovery and just finally beginning that long, painful process of rebuilding.
And so, this huge policy shift leaves us with one profound, overarching question. With these economic chains broken and a new government trying to re-engage with the world, what will a post-Assad future for Syria actually look like? That's the chapter that is only just beginning to be written.